Hello everyone, my name is the Storyteller, and today I will share with you some horror stories to help you fall asleep. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. But before that, write down in the comments from where you are listening to this and what time it is. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss upcoming horror stories. The Silent Harvester. Chapter 1. The House at the End of Merrill Lane. No one remembered when the house was built. It stood deeper in the woods than any paved road dared stretch, leaning forward with age as if eavesdropping on the wind. The shutters always hung loose. Window panes had turned yellow like teeth. Anyone who walked past it swore they could smell rot, wood decay, old blood, or maybe fever. Kids in the nearby town of Chesterfield dared each other to go there. None stayed long. Some said they felt watched. Others heard footsteps when nothing was visible. Parents chalked it up to imagination, but the truth was simpler and far more disturbing. The house was lived in, and Earl Whitlock lived there alone. To most townspeople, Whitlock was just a tall shape seen in the grocery store once every few weeks. He bought bleach, rope, and fresh-cut meat, not the usual list, but small towns let strange men exist undisturbed. The few who spoke to him afterward always mentioned the same thing. His eyes didn't look at you. They looked through you, like he was measuring something invisible. The truth was that Earl had a purpose, and Chesterton had always been rich with what he needed. People. Chapter 2. The Disappearance of Maya Hansen. Maya Hansen had been missing for 30 days, and the entire police department was exhausted. Her phone had last been near the edge of Blackwood Forest, the same direction Merrill Lane disappeared in the trees. The sheriff gathered volunteers, flashlights, tracking dogs, and a tired sense of hope. They combed the woods in lines, shouting Maya's name to the wind. Peter Lang, Maya's father, stumbled forward through the brush with a desperation that bordered on madness. His voice cracked each time he yelled. He didn't care about brambles scratching his skin or branches snapping against his throat. He only cared about finding her. Sheriff Dalton tried to keep the volunteers calm, but every minute made the search colder. A girl missing for 3 days in Blackwood Forest rarely turned up alive. Just past dusk, one of the dogs began barking violently near an overgrown deer trail. Searchlights converged. Dalton pushed through and froze. A shoe. A white sneaker with pink laces. Maya always tied in double bows. Peter broke when he saw it. He fell to his knees, wailing into the dirt. Dalton clenched his teeth. There were no footprints leading away, just disturbed soil, as if someone had dragged Maya off the path and erased the rest. The sheriff didn't know it yet, but Maya had never left the forest. She was already inside the house on Merrill Lane. Chapter 3. Inside the basement. The basement beneath Earl Whitlock's home was older than the house itself. Stone walls oozed condensation. Rusted chains hung like iron bonds. The single bulb swinging above cast a sickly light that made motion flicker even when the room was still. Maya lay strapped to a wooden table, wrists tied raw. Her mouth was bound with cloth that tasted of salt and copper. She tried to scream, but sound only vibrated inside her skull. Earl approached silently, wheeling a metal tray covered by a sheet. She trembled. He lifted the cloth. Tools. Not surgical ones. Worse. Things repurposed. Meat hooks, chipped blades, a carpenter's hand drill, bone saws that had no right being used on people. Earl spoke rarely, but when he did, it was in a low, thoughtful tone, like he was narrating a science documentary. Most harvesters waste their materials, he said, but I use everything. Maya screamed behind the desk, thrashing so hard the table shook. Earl sighed, almost disappointed. No appreciation for craftsmanship anymore. He picked up the saw. Chapter 4. Deputy Collins notices something. 3 days after the search, Deputy Jill Collins sat in the patrol officer scrolling through reports. She was the newest deputy in Chesterfield, sharp, stubborn and unafraid to think differently. Her desk was cluttered with photos of missing persons, 4 cases in 3 years, too many for a town of 2,000. Same forest, same pattern, no bodies, no leads. She pulled up satellite maps and began overlaying the phone ping locations. When she connected them, her stomach twisted. All signals disappeared inside the same circular radius, about a mile wide. Merrill Lane sat dead center. "Sheriff," she called, rushing into Dalton's office. "I think we've been searching the wrong areas. We need a warrant to check around that old house." Dalton didn't even look up. No judge is signing a warrant to search a house that old without probable cause. We have nothing. Collins slammed the printout onto his desk. 4 missing people in the same zone is probable cause. Dalton rubbed his face. "That house has been there since my grandfather was a kid. If someone were killing people there, we'd know." "No," Collins answered quietly. "We wouldn't, because whoever is doing this is smart." Dalton stared at him, suddenly uneasy. The truth had begun to surface. Chapter 5, Earl cleans up. After finishing the file, Earl did what he always did, he cleaned. The basement floor was sloped slightly toward a drain he had widened decades ago. Water mixed with chemicals and blood spiraled downward in a dirty whirlpool. Earl scrubbed methodically, humming without a melody. His humming was the only sound not soaked in horror. He didn't kill for anger or pleasure. It was work, routine, purpose. In his mind, he harvested people like farmers harvested crops. Select a ripe target, bring them home, extract what is useful, and dispose of the rest. Tonight, though, something felt different. He sensed pressure, eyes, searchers in the woods, dogs barking miles away. He walked upstairs and looked through a crack in the boards covering his window. Flashlight voices were moving. They were getting closer than ever before. Earl felt no fear, only calculated. He whispered, "Time for new harvest." Then he closed the shutters and prepared to hunt again. Chapter 6, Another Girl Goes Missing. 3 days after Maya vanished, 17-year-old Amber Keene left the Shivers diner. A coworker walked her to the parking lot and offered to follow her home, but Amber waved it off, teasing him with angry protective. By the time she reached the road that curved toward Blackwood Forest, she sensed the silent shift. The wind stopped. Tree roots along the path against each other. The entire forest felt like it was holding its breath. She checked her rearview mirror. Headlights appeared behind her. No car she recognized. The light stayed a fixed distance back, never passing, never falling behind. Amber swallowed. She accelerated. So did the car. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, but the call dropped. No service this deep in the woods. Chesterton carriers always failed at night. The road narrowed. Trees crowded over dark windows. The headlights began drifting closer until they filled the windows, burning into her eyes. Amber couldn't breathe. Then she saw something to play. A figure in the road. She swerved, slammed on the brakes, skidding sideways as her tires screeched on wet asphalt. The car slammed into a tree. Her windshield started to crack. She was dazed, blinking. Someone pulled her door open. Gloved hands. Then nothing. The second girl had disappeared. Chapter 7, Collinsville's Road. Deputy Collins sat at her desk with a headache that felt like someone pushing hands into her brain. She wasn't allowed to search Merrill Lane. Dalton was too focused on procedure and politics. But Collins didn't join the force to shut the paper and watch the names vanish. She opened the evidence room with a thumb. Flashlight, gloves, sidearm, and earring. Against the partner rules, she took an extra radio, logging it out. Jill, someone said behind her. She heads. Jerry Haskins, another deputy, the doorway. You're not thinking of going out there alone. Someone has That's exactly why I'm going. Jerry cursed and tossed me a pack of batteries. At least take extras. Radio through every little team. If you go quiet, I'm coming out. Collins nodded once, grateful but unshaken. She stepped out into the cold night air and started the engine. The cruiser rumbled to life. She flicked off her overhead lights and rode without sirens, careful not to draw attention. If Chesterton's killer was in that forest, she'd find her. Or they'd find her. Chapter 8, The Basement Once Again. Amber woke up fatigued and mind-hacked. It was strange cutting. Her head pounded, vision foggy, dreaming. She smelled oil, then a mold, and something worse, dried blood. She couldn't see Earl yet, but she heard him, listening softly. The sound echoed through the storm, bouncing against walls until she couldn't tell where it came from. Her heart quickened. She tried pulling loose, but the straps didn't give. Earl emerged from the shadows, wearing an apron stained with overlapping colors, like faded brush strokes on a painter's cloth. Awake sooner than expected, he said calmly. Good, less weight. Amber shook her head violently, voice muffled behind the cloth deck. Earl reached out, sliding a finger down the cheek with a touch almost gentle. Young, healthy, strong heart, excellent teeth. Amber felt violently. She didn't understand what he meant, but she understood one thing. She wasn't leaving alive. Chapter 9, The House Not Yet Seen. Collins parked the cruiser a quarter mile from Mary Lane and continued on foot. The forest was silent, coldly immature, as though every living thing hid from something older and human than winter. Branches creaked overhead, leaves shifted without wind. She checked her weapon twice, then scanned the area with her flashlight. After 8 minutes, she reached the house. Her breath caught. It wasn't just the pain, it was predatory, like a jawbone sticking out of the ground, waiting for someone to walk inside. No lights, no sound, no car, no signs of habitation except the faint metallic scent that drifted from underneath the floorboards. Should she call for backup? She reached for her radio, then stopped. If she called, Dalton pulled her back. Worse, the word might travel. If someone really lived, they'd hear the sirens and vanish into the woods before she could find evidence. So Collins did what only someone desperately brave or foolish would do. She went in alone. The front door creaked like a coffin lid as she pushed it open. The smell hit her instantly. Wow, disinfectant and iron. She swept her light across the room. Old furniture, dust, scratches on the floor or something heavy with drag. A dark stain along the basement, not recent but not ancient. Her pulse quickened. Someone had came in a hurry. She noticed a doorway leading down. Basement stairs. She stood at the top, breath visible in the dark air. And from below, a faint scream. Chapter 10, The Hunt Begins. Earl finished preparing his tools when he heard it. A floorboard upstairs shifted under someone's weight. Not a raccoon, not wood swelling in the cold. A person. A brave one. He didn't panic. Earl almost never did. Instead, he carefully placed the bone saw on a metal tray, wiped his hands with a cloth, and clicked off the basement light. Amber froze as darkness swallowed the room. She could no longer see Earl, but she could hear him. Boots approaching the stairs, slow, patient, confident. Upstairs, Collins crept down each step, gun raised, flashlight cutting a narrow path through the dark. The scream she heard might have been distant, but she knew it was real. Someone was alive down there. She swallowed hard. A sound echoed, a board shifted. She wasn't alone down here. Whoever else was in the basement. Quiet. Too quiet. Collins flicked her flashlight toward the bottom of the steps. A figure stood there. Tall, motionless, watching. His voice slid out like a whisper. You shouldn't be here. Collins fired. The basement exploded in sound, and the hunt began. Chapter 11, Gunfire in the Dark. The gunshot cracked through the basement like a thunderclap. Collins' ears rang as her flashlight whipped in her hand. The figure vanished from where it stood. She descended 3 more steps, gun raised. Her heart hammered against her ribs so loudly she felt certain of killing her. Halfway down, she stepped on something slipped. She shined her light. Blood, not fresh, layered. The beam flicked toward the ceiling, hook marks, chains, dark stains that no rain had washed away. She had been right. Someone had been hunting Chesterwood for years. Then she heard breathing, slow, steady behind her. She spun. A hand like a steel clamp seized her wrist, twisting until pain shot through her bones. She dropped her flashlight. Earl Whitlock shoved her backwards against the wall, his face inches from hers. The man didn't smile. His expression was detached, almost bored, as if confronting an armed police officer was a mild inconvenience. "You're interrupting my work," he said quietly. Collins went for her gun, but Earl slammed her arm into the wall again. Something snapped. She cried out. He reached for her throat. A scream echoed from deep in the basement. Amber. Earl's eyes flipped away for half a second. Enough time for Collins to slam her into his stomach. He staggered. Collins grabbed her gun with a good hand and fired again. Earl disappeared into the darkness as the bullet sparked against stone. Chapter 12, The Girls in the Walls. Collins fumbled for her flashlight and spotted a switch bolted to the wall, an old breaker. She flipped it. Lights flickered on, and she froze. The basement walls were covered in dozens of hole wounds, victims of different ages, faces terrified, many taking seconds before death. Beneath several photos were small notes written in block letters. Harvest complete. Heart taken. Muscle preserved. Collins felt her stomach twist. Then she saw something worse. A section of wall patched over with wood boards. Old, mismatched planks. Nails hammered in at uneven angles. From behind them came a faint, rhythmic tapping. She approached slowly, pressing her ear against the wood. Tap, 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 tap. Morse code. She recognized it barely. Her father had taught her when she was 10. They, S, no, D-S-O, desolation, no, desperation. Whoever was inside was alive. Hold on, Collins whispered. I'm getting you out. She wedged the butt of her gun under one board and pulled, muscles straining despite the pain in her arm. A nail popped loose. Something shifted behind her. Movement in the shadows. Chapter 13, Amber fights back. While Collins struggled with the boards, Amber had one thought: escape or die. The straps were leather, secured with old buckles. Earl had done this hundreds of times. He knew how to bind someone so movement only caused more pain. But Amber wasn't testing the straps. She was looking at the table. A rusty chisel lay near her hip, barely in reach. She stretched her fingers, scraping her skin raw until she felt the handle. She hooked it with her last knuckle. It slid off the table onto the floor. Too far now. Amber's throat tightened. But then something else caught her eye. The metal tray holding Earl's tools had wheels. If she rocked her hips hard enough, she heaved her body sideways. The table shifted with a wooden groan. Again. The metal tray moved, inching closer. Finally, the edge of the tray brushed the chisel on the floor, tipped it back within reach. Amber hooked it again and dragged it under her palm. Her wrists bled as she saw that the strap and teeth clenched, with tears cutting paths down her face. From the stairwell above came another gunshot. She didn't have long. The leather finally snapped. Amber sat up abruptly, ripping gag from her mouth and gasping air. She had no plan, but she had a weapon, and she wasn't going to die quietly. Chapter 14. Earl changes again. Collins was halfway there, finding the doors loose when the lights went out. Total blackness. She spun, weapon raised. It was strange. The room hum as machinery powered down. Earl had cut the switches from somewhere else in the basement. He had turned the house into his battlefield. Collins switched on the tiny backup flashlight. Its cone was weak and narrow, barely illuminating 2 steps ahead. "Come out," she shouted. "Hands up." A voice answered in the dark. "You came alone. Why?" His tone wasn't mocking. It was curious, like he was afraid to know. Collins swallowed. "Because someone has to stop me." Earl chuckled softly. "You misunderstand. I am not a villain. I am a provider. I use my case." Collins shined the light toward the doors, but Earl wasn't there anymore. He was moving, circling, her pulse roaring in her ears. From behind her, barely audible. "You should have brought help. I should have lunged." Collins fired blindly. The muzzle flash lit stone and steel, saws and hooks and horrible instruments built for torture. Earl vanished into the dark again, and Collins realized she was outmatched. Chapter 15. Someone else arrives. Outside the house, another pair of headlights cut through the trees. Deputy Jerry Haskins sat behind the wheel, tapping the steering wheel anxiously. Collins hadn't radiated. Not once. That wasn't light though. He opened the cruiser's door, shotgun in hand. The forest around him felt long, quiet, and suggestive. As he approached the house, he smelled the metallic scent before he reached the porch. His stomach churned. Inside, he saw the open basement door and heard another scream. Amber this time. He stormed down the stairs, shotgun raised, and something crashed into him from the side, slamming him into the wall. His gun dropped, skidding across the floor. Earl stepped out of darkness, towering over him. Jerry scrambled backward. "You're early," Earl said calmly. Jerry grabbed another pipe from the floor and swung. Earl caught his wrist, twisted, and the bone cracked. Jerry screamed. Earl leaned close. Your sacrifice will not be wasted. He raised the blade. Bang! A gunshot echoed. Earl staggered, shoulder jerking. Collins stood 10 feet away, gun raised, hard blood running down. "Get away from me." Earl straightened, glanced at the bullet wound in his side. "This is becoming inconvenient." He turned and disappeared into a side corridor before she could fire again. Collins ran to Jerry. "Then you stand." "I'll manage," he groaned, teeth gritted. Collins helped him up. Jerry pointed toward the far hall. "There's someone else down there." Collins nodded. Then another scream cut through the dark. Amber's voice, full of terror. They weren't done yet. Chapter 16. Amber Strikes Back. Amber moved in the dark, chiseled ribs so tightly her knuckles turned white. The basement was a maze of cables, parts, and old shelving creating narrow passageways. Every creak of wood felt like a scream in silence. She could hear faint voices somewhere ahead, 2, 3. One was a woman calling out. Another was a man groaning in pain. Help! Help was here. She just had to reach them. But she also heard something else. Footsteps. Not hurrying. Measured calm. Earl was moving. Hunting. Amber crouched behind a wooden storage rack as footsteps came closer. She could see the silhouette pass. Tall, broad, something long and sharp in his hand, a strip of emergency laser light flickering overhead. He spoke softly, almost to himself. Not many escape the table. Impressive. Amber clamped her hand over her mouth to muffle her breath. He stopped walking. He was listening. Amber didn't move, didn't dare exhale. After several seconds, Earl continued on, disappearing into the dark. Amber swallowed and edged toward the voices. She had one advantage Earl had never expected. No one fought back this far into his killing field. Chapter 17. A door no one was meant to open. Collins led Jerry to the basement door whose sweeping of flashlight and arcs. The deeper they went, the more the stone changed, from concrete to old and uneven masonry. This place hadn't been built with a house. It had been built without the carved expanded. They reached another door, heavy steel with a deadbolt the size of Collins' hand. Someone had reinforced this room to stay in or keep people out. Jerry nodded. That's where the scream came from. Collins braced, turned the bolt, and slowly opened the door. The smell hit them first. Blood, bleach, and something more organic. The room was lined with freezers, industrial freezers, and piles of plastic containers labeled with dates and handwritten notes. Lung preserved viable. Clavicle damaged. Left kidney excellent. Jerry gagged. Collins felt ice crawl up her spine. Earl wasn't killing at random. He was harvesting bodies like inventory. Then Jerry pointed to a table in the center of the room. Maya, he whispered. Collins' heart dropped. A girl lay on the table under a sheet. She braced herself and approached, lifting the corner with trembling fingers. The sheet revealed a face, young, pale, eyes vacant. Collins exhaled slowly. Maya Hansen, the missing girl. Gone. She lowered the sheet gently, jaw tightening. Earl Whitlock was no madman. He was a system, and systems needed to be destroyed. Chapter 18. Earl revisits his past. Earl reached a hidden alcove behind the furnace room, his sanctuary. A bare bulb hung above an old trunk. He switched it on and opened the trunk with care. Inside were rows of yellow newspaper clippings, journals, and hand-drawn diagrams showing human anatomy, detailed written in tiny script. A boy's picture appeared in one article. Young Earl Whitlock found locked in cellar, parents arrested him. He remembered the cellar. He remembered the dark. He remembered the lessons his father repeated daily. Everything has a purpose. Waste nothing. His father used animals, rabbits, dogs Earl had watched. Later, he was made to participate. Earl had learned to know himself early, learned precision, learned silence. He whispered now into the empty air. Father, I improved the craft. You would be proud. He didn't know, couldn't know, that in the last room behind him, Amber was inching closer with murder in her eyes. Chapter 19. The girls in the walls revealed. Collins returned to the boarded wall she had been prying open earlier. Jerry covered her with a metal tube raised like a club. Collins resumed pulling nails with the back of her gun. One board came free. Then another. A small cold hand reached through the gap. Collins jerked back, but then realized it wasn't attacking her. It was trembling, reaching for help. She pried the remaining boards loose until a child-sized crawl space opened. Inside were 3 girls. One about 12, another maybe 16, a third barely older than Amber. All pale, all half-starved, all terrified. Their mouths were gagged with strips of cloth, arms loosely tied in front. Earl didn't restrain them harshly. He didn't need to. They had nowhere to go. Collins rushed in and cut their bindings. It's okay, she whispered. You're safe now. The youngest girl clung to her neck, sobbing. Jerry helped the other 2 stand. Collins inhaled deeply. 3 girls rescued, 1 found dead. But somewhere else, Amber and Earl were still hunting. Chapter 20. Amber and Earl collide. Amber left the storage rack and slipped deeper into the furnace corridor. She saw Earl ahead, silhouetted against the glow of the bulb in his hidden alcove. He was reading a journal. Head bowed. Relax. She could kill him now. Amber raised the chisel, creeping closer, heart pounding so hard her vision blurred. She got within 5 feet. Then the floorboard under her foot groaned. Earl's head lifted. Their eyes met. He moved first. He threw the heavy journal like a weapon. It struck Amber across the face, knocking her sideways just as he lunged. Amber slashed blindly with the chisel, screaming. Metal cut flesh. Earl grunted, surprised. His forearm was bleeding where the blade tore in. You, he hissed, should have stayed on the table. Amber's fear melted into rage. I'm not dying here. She drove the chisel again, and Earl caught her wrist, squeezing until her bones ground together. Amber shrieked and dropped the chisel. Earl lifted her by the throat with his other hand. Feet off the ground. Amber clawed at his arm, vision dimmed. Then, 3 gunshots thundered from the hallway. Earl staggered, dropping Amber. Blood burst from his ribs as Collins and Jerry appeared, weapons raised. Earl stared at them, expression still calm, even fascinated. You found the others, he whispered. Collins fired again. But Earl turned and ran deeper into the basement, disappearing into an unlit tunnel none of them had seen before. Amber coughed violently, throat bruised, tears streaming. Collins helped her up. You're okay, she said. You're safe now. Amber shook her head violently. No, not yet. He's running. He knows the tunnels. He knows everything down there. And she was right. In the darkness, Earl disappeared. But he was far from finished. Chapter 21, The Tunnels Beneath the Tunnels. Earl vanished into the black corridor, his footsteps barely audible. Collins swept the flashlight beam down the passage, but the light seemed swallowed by darkness, as if the house itself wanted to hide him. Jerry leaned against the wall, gripping his broken arm, pale with pain. We can't chase him, he rasped. We don't know what's down there. Amber wiped blood from her mouth. He built these tunnels. They go deeper than the basement. He knows every twist. Collins looked at the 3 girls huddled behind him and made her decision. She handed Jerry her radio. Get them outside. Call for backup. Don't argue. Jerry stared back but nodded. He wasn't in fighting shape. Collins chambered a new round. Amber stepped forward. I'm going with you. You need medical. Amber glared with a fire Collins couldn't argue. He tried to cut me open. I'm not letting him walk away. Collins didn't answer, but she didn't stop her either. Together, they followed Earl into the dark. Chapter 22, A Maze of Madness. The tunnel quickly slanted downward. The air cooled and thickened with damp stone and chemical fumes. Amber covered her mouth as the smell of bleach stung her eyes. This isn't just a basement, she whispered. It's a system. Collins observed the walls, brick changed into chiseled rock. Someone had widened these passages over the decades. Earl didn't just kill him. He lived here. After a bend, they found a fork. Collins aimed her flashlight down both routes. Left descended further. Right curved into darkness. Then they saw something carved into the wall, small scratches, tallies, hundreds of them. Names scratched below, faded and overlapping. Earl's diary of death. Amber swallowed, counted them. Footsteps echoed behind them, Jerry's voice called faintly. They're out, backup's coming. Good, but at that time was running short. Collins pointed to the left passage. He's heading deeper, that's where we go. They descended into the dark. Chapter 23, Earl sets the trap. Earl reached the lowest chamber, a room filled with living had ever seen. Stone pillars supported the ceiling. An old water system dripped into a pool that faintly sweeping all above. He pressed a hand against his bleeding ribs. The bullet wounds burned, but pain had always been commanding. If anything, it was sharper. opened the rusted metal lock on the door and drew a long butcher's knife, its edge polished with hair. He whispered, "They always come." He turned and walked to the center of the chamber, where a series of metal rods were embedded into the floor like rails. He had designed them years ago, and they had changed this mechanism in the entrance. A trap. He knelt and began settling. Earl didn't fear dying. He feared dying without a final harvest. Chapter 24, the final descent. Amber and slowly, guns raised, flashing tightly in the darkness. The walls here bore older marks, scratches that had been added by Earl. This place had been settled long before the house was built. Collins realized with regret. Earl's trauma hadn't begun. He had continued with something else. Amber froze. Up ahead lay something on the tunnel floor. A shoe. A small dress shoe bore side. Collins examined it and saw dried blood on the inside. She set it down gently. They continued until the tunnel widened into a massive underground chamber. It was silent. Too silent. Amber's voice trembled. "You see it?" Collins scanned the shadow. Then the trap triggered. Playing click snap. Metal rails shot up from the floor like spears. Collins shoved Amber aside. Both hitting the ground as sharpened rods blasted upward, painting the air. A second trigger snapped. Heavy chains dropped to the ceiling. Earl stepped out in the dark. "What's your knife?" "You shouldn't have come here," he said calmly. "My father always taught me." Amber charged him. Collins yelled, "No." Earl swung. Amber ducked beneath the blade, sliding across the stone floor and hitting him over her shoulder. The blow staggered him, but didn't drop him. He caught her by the hair and flung her to the stone floor. She hit with a cry and vision swim. Collins fired twice. Earl rolled behind the pillar, bullets sparking on the gun. Then he was moving again, fast for a man his age, unpredictable in the dark. The final confrontation had begun. Chapter 25, the past and the present collide. Earl lunged from behind the pillar, knife aimed for Collins' throat. She blocked with her forearm, pain screaming up the broken bone, and fired quickly. The shot ripped into Earl's abdomen. He didn't stop. He slammed her with such force she skidded across the stone. The gun flew through the air, clattering through the water. Earl stood over her, knife raised. "You think I'm a monster," he murmured. "But the world throws its unwanted way. I simply make use of it." Collins spat blood. "You don't get to justify murder." He pressed the knife to her throat. My father told me. A scream tore from the chamber. "Shut you, pig." Amber hurled herself at Earl, driving the chisel deep into the side of his neck. Earl's eyes widened, not with fear, but with some strange emotion Collins couldn't place. Shock, recognition, maybe even pride. He staggered, dropping the knife. Collins scrambled to his feet and grabbed him. Earl fell to his knees. Amber ripped the chisel free, screaming with every ounce of fury and rage she held inside for days. Collins raised the butcher knife. Earl looked up at him, eyes fatty and steady. "You survived," he whispered. "Good." Collins drove the blade down on him. Earl Whitlock collapsed onto the stone floor, finally still. The silent harvester had left. Chapter 26, the house that breath. The basement door slammed shut behind the tenant farmer as he descended into every strange childhood home. The air was stale, like the house was holding its breath. Dust floated in the air when it was flashing. The house had been abandoned for years, but it still felt lived in, because someone had returned. A trail of dry footprints led into the basement. A faint groan echoed from the back wall. Marlowe raised his gun, pulsed. A single light bulb flickered over the wall wall wasn't a wall at all. It was a fake panel. Behind it, another room. Inside were shelves lined with cassette tapes, tapes and radio. He pulled one at random. Victim 12, confession. His stomach twisted. Crane had recorded everything. From the darkness behind him, a whisper. Careful with those, their memories. Marlowe spun around. Nothing. But everyone was in the house, and the house itself seemed to know it. Chapter 27, tape 12. Marlowe shoved the tape into a dusty recorder and pressed play. Static. Then, screaming. A young woman cried, begging to go home. Crane's voice entered, calm as a priest giving confession. Everyone deserves honesty before the end. Tell me what darkness said. The screaming warped into a gurgle. Marlowe stopped the tape, bile rising in his throat. He had solved dozens of cases, seen horrors that haunted sleep, but this was something worse. Everett didn't just kill, he curated pain. A shuffle and movement behind him. He fired. Sparks exploded from the pipe. Then Crane's voice, smooth and close. Detective, we should finish our story properly. Marlowe turned. Crane stood just beyond the flickering light, smiling. Chapter 28, the monster speaks. Why? Marlowe demanded, gun locked on target. Crane stepped forward, every motion polished and patient. Because truth is the rarest thing in the world, Everett said. People live lies all their lives. I simply free them. You tortured them. I revealed them. Marlowe's hand trembled. Crane even laughed softly. You want to kill me, detective, I can see it. You want the world rid of me, but you won't do it. Heroes can't stain their hands. Marlowe swallowed. Look around. Every trophy, every tape, their stories. My life's work. You're here because you understand. I understand you're insane. Crane's eyes glittered. History doesn't remember sanity, only legacy. And then Crane lunged. Marlowe fired. Crane vanished behind the shelves, a shadow dissolving into a maze of horrors. Chapter 29, the burning house. Marlowe chased him deeper into the basement, through a door that led into the boiler room. Crane struck from behind, sending Marlowe crashing to the floor. The gun clattered away. Crane picked it up. Your death, Everett said calmly, will be my final chapter. Marlowe, still dazed, crawled backward toward a lever on the wall. He didn't know what it controlled when he pulled. The old furnace roared to life. Gas pipes rattled, pressure gauges spiked. Crane looked around, eyes wide. Marlowe croaked, if I die, you're coming with me. Flames lit the ceiling. The entire house shook. Crane lunged for the stairs. Marlowe followed, staggering to his feet. The house groaned, boards cracking and beams sagging as heat spread through the walls. Crane reached the top of the basement steps, and the entire ceiling collapsed, burying him in roaring fire and splintered timber. Marlowe barely made it out the front door as the house exploded behind him, lighting the night sky. Chapter 30, After the Flames. Fire engines painted the night red. Marlowe sat on the curb, face blackened with soot, wrapped in a blanket. Chief Hanley approached, you alive. Barely, Marlowe rasped. And Crane. Marlowe shook his head. No one survives that. Hanley nodded, then it's over. But even as he said it, a firefighter jogged over holding a melting metal box. Detective, we found this in the basement before the roof caved. Marlowe opened it. Inside were dozens more tapes, untouched by fire. Each one labeled. Each one a story that had never been heard. Hanley muttered, Jesus. Marlowe stared into the flames climbing the sky. Maybe Crane was dead. Maybe not. But his voice, his legacy was still alive, waiting to be played. And Marlowe realized the truth. This wasn't the end. It was only the end of a chapter. Somewhere in the burning room, under the sirens and crackling timbers, he imagined he could still hear Everett Crane's voice whisper, "Stories never die." The ending. Zombie Apocalypse Chapter 1. The siren that broke the world. No one in the town of Blackman paid much attention when the siren started. The emergency system was old. Everyone assumed it was another test, another failure of outdated equipment. But at 2:14 a.m., the sound changed. It wasn't the rising and falling wail of the warning system. It was one long, continuous scream. Daniel Reeves sat up in bed. His apartment was dark, but the red emergency light strode through his blinds like a pounding heartbeat. He checked his phone. No alerts, no warnings, no messages. Then came the first explosion. A thunderous boom somewhere downtown rattled his windows. He nearly fell out of bed as blue-white light lit up the sky. He rushed to the window and saw flames growing in the distance and dozens of tiny figures running on all fours, running fast. Then the screaming began. Chapter 2, The First Neighbor. Daniel raced to wake his roommate Justin, but Justin's door was already open. His room was empty. "Justin," he shouted, no answer. A sound came from the hallway, a wet, dragging shuffle. Daniel stepped out, heart hammering. Mrs. Howell, an elderly woman from 4B, was in the hallway. He exhaled and breathed until she turned around. Half her jaw was missing. Her mouth hung open, tongue lolling loose. Her clothes were soaked in blood, and one of her eyes had turned milky gray. She had no humanity left. She snarled and launched herself at Daniel with speed no old woman could possess. He slammed the apartment door in her face just as she hit it, claws scratching wood. She screamed and pounded at the door. Daniel grabbed the heaviest thing he had, a metal lamp, just in case the door gave way. From outside the building, more screams rose, overlapping enemies. The siren howled on, and the world outside began to die. Chapter 3, The Man on the Radio. Power flickered, then went out. Daniel's phone had one bar of battery left. No signal. His only light was the emergency glow from outside. Justin was still missing, and every second felt like a countdown. He turned on the old emergency, radio just trips. He spun through static until the voice cut in. Low, ragged, terrifying. If you can hear this, quarantine failed. The outbreak is citywide, possibly statewide. Daniel froze. The infected don't die. Head trauma slows them down. Don't let them bite you. Don't let them kill you. A scream, something heavy crashing, gunshots. The radio went dead. Daniel sat frozen, blood pounding. No police coming. No military. No rescue. A scratching sound. Slowly, a face rose. Not human anymore. Dead eyes, torn lips, teeth grinding. It opened its mouth and shrieked against the glass. Chapter 4, Escape. Daniel grabbed a bag, stuffed it with whatever he could. Water bottles, granola bars, pocket. He needed a weapon, something real. Justin's room. Yes, he remembered Justin had an aluminum baseball bat. Daniel edged down the hallway. Mrs. Howell was gone, but blood smeared the wall where she had opened the door. He reached the stairwell and looked down. Bodies, 5 or 6 broken, wooden parts and twitching. Something shuffled nearby. Daniel gripped the railing, every muscle trembling. A man in torn delivery. His neck was missing a chunk, spine visible under shredded skin. His body collapsed down the stairs, yet he still crawled, dragging himself closer, reaching with skeletal fingers. Daniel ran. Up 2 floors, past bloodstained steps, across to Justin's door. He burst inside, grabbed the bat and froze. On the floor was Justin, pale, motionless, not breathing. stepped closer to his arm. Justin opened his eyes. Gray empty. Then he sat up. Chapter 5, Bringing Down the Phone. Justin approached Daniel's name, at least something like it. His throat had been torn open, flesh hanging like wet fabric. He lunged. Daniel swung the bat with every ounce of strength he had. Bone cracked. Justin fell and didn't stop. He started getting up again, blood pooling beneath him. Daniel hit him again, and again, and again. The room echoed with little impacts, choking sobs, until Justin stopped moving. Daniel staggered back, shaking violently. This was real. This was the world now. He looked at his friend's broken body, tears streaming down his face. Sorry, he whispered. A roar of infected screams rose from the bloody floors. They were coming up. He wiped his eyes, gripped the bat, and forced himself into motion. He needed to get out. He needed to survive. Outside the window, the city of Blackwood was burning, and the night had only begun. Chapter 6, The Fall of the Daniel reached the rooftop exit door just as the first infected hit the stairwell behind him. He slammed the metal door shut and locked it, hands shaking. The rooftop was cold and smoky, filled with the orange glow of fires from the burning city. Helicopters cut through the night sky, but they weren't rescuing anything. They were firing down on the streets below. Gunfire echoed. Entire buildings were burning. Cars lay crushed in the turn. Blackwood was home to was no longer a city. It was a war zone. A figure crawled across the gravel rooftop. Daniel swung the bat in his hand, only to realize it was a soldier. The man had been bitten 3 times. One arm was barely attached. Daniel dropped beside him. Medic, the soldier croaked. I am not. The soldier grabbed Daniel's shirt, blood running down his fingers. They don't turn instantly. You have minutes. His eyes followed. Don't let them take you. He pressed something into Daniel's hand, a flare gun. Then he slumped his last breath with a rapid sigh. Daniel swallowed hard. The rooftop door rattled. The infected were almost through. He had to run. He had to live. Chapter 7, The SDRETS Commander. Daniel tied the flare to his backpack, climbed down the final escape. The metal rungs burned hot in the flames below. As he descended, a monstrous light flowed through the streets. Hundreds of infected swarmed through section, crashing through windows, tearing through people who hadn't escaped yet. Some ran, some crawled, some dragged their broken bodies forward, like puppets pulled by invisible strings. Gunshots cracked from every direction. A police SUV sped down the road, only to hit a pile of wrecked cars and flip, rolling 3 times before bursting into flame. Screams followed. Daniel jumped the last 10 feet. His knees screamed in pain, but he forced himself up and sprinted behind an abandoned bus. From there, he saw them clearly. Not all of the infected were caved in. Some looked almost normal, except for their eyes filmed over and dead. Their mouths churned constantly, jaws working as if still chewing. He closed his eyes just 1 second too long. A shadow darted from beneath the flipped SUV. A crawling woman, lower half torn off, dragged herself toward him, nails ripping along asphalt. Daniel backed up with a gasp. The woman hissed, teeth falling from her mouth as she snapped at him. He had to keep moving. He dashed down the street, praying the city had one safe corner left. Chapter 8, The Last Pharmacy. Daniel made it to the pharmacy on 5th Street, a sturdy building with metal shutters half closed. Lights flickered inside. Someone was there. He tapped the glass. No response. He banged louder. Hello, anyone alive in there, please? The lights turned off. He swore loudly, kicked the door, then turned to leave. A gun cocked behind the door. Turn around slow, the woman said. Daniel did. A middle-aged woman with a nurse's badge and a rifle stared back. Two terrified teenagers stood behind her holding knives. You bet, she demanded. No, Daniel lifted his shirt sleeves, even neck. I'm clean. She lowered the barrel, but not her guard. Inside, quick. He slipped in, and she slammed the shutters down again. The pharmacy was a makeshift bunker. Crates of supplies stacked high, windows barricaded, radios and maps spread across the counter. You armed? She asked. Daniel showed the back. She sighed. Better than nothing, I'm Margaret. I worked the hospital ER until, well, nobody works there anymore. Daniel looked around. How bad is it? Margot's eyes hardened. This isn't a virus. Daniel's stomach twisted. What do you mean? Margot leaned in close. They don't just eat people, they multiply. Chapter 9, The Terrible Truth. Margot pulled out a blood-stained clipboard. The forms on it were from the hospital intake logs, lab notes, doctor observations. She pointed to a circled line repeatedly. Sporulation of a tissue sample. Rapid cellular budding. Mass reproduction observed. Daniel blinked. Are you saying they grow inside the body? Margot nodded grimly. Within hours, new organisms form in the infected blood when a host gets too damaged. A soft, wet pop echoed from behind the counter. Daniel flinched. Margot gestured him forward. Behind the register lay a corpse. A man who had clearly died that morning. The skin pale but intact, the body still warm. Dozens of tiny white lumps pulsed beneath the skin. I've watched them push out of the dead like spores, she whispered. They burst, they harden, within minutes they hatch. Daniel's mouth went dry. How do you kill them? Margot shook her head. We don't know yet, but the military was trying to find one. Daniel looked up sharply. It was. The building rattled with distant explosions. The city's being wiped, she said softly. They gave up. Daniel stared at the door. He wasn't staying here. He wasn't waiting to die. Chapter 10, The Infected Breach. A crash echoed from back home. Everyone froze. The teenagers tightened their grips on the knives. Margot raised her rifle, eyes narrowed. Back room, she whispered. Daniel grabbed the bat and followed. They crept toward the storage corridor. Something heavy slammed against the metal emergency exit. Bang, bang, bang. Margot tensed. They found us. The hinges groaned. Bolts snapped loose. Daniel whispered, how many? Margot's reply was barely audible. All of them. The door exploded inward. 3 infected hurled inside at full speed. Bloody, shrieking, eyes wild and sightless. Margot fired. One went down. Daniel swung the bat, cracking another across the skull. It hit the ground, twitching. The third got past him. It leapt onto one of the teenagers, teeth tearing into the shoulder. Daniel grabbed the creature and smashed its head until bone shattered. The teenager whimpered, already pale. Margot turned slowly toward him. The boy looked up, eyes watering. No, please. She raised the rifle, her hands trembling. Daniel closed his eyes as the gunshot rang out. The pharmacy was no longer safe. And outside, the infected howled in the streets, drawn by the sound. Daniel looked at the others. Pack what you can, he said. We're leaving. The world was ending. And staying still meant dying. Chapter 11, Into the Fire. They worked fast. Daniel grabbed medical supplies, bottled water, protein bars, and anything that looked remotely useful. Margot stuffed antibiotics and painkillers into a duffel of the remaining team. Ava loaded knives and kitchen shears into her backpack. Outside, the screams grew louder. The infected swarmed the street, drawn by the gunshots and the scent of blood. Daniel peeked through a crack in the boarded window. Hundreds. Some ran, some crawled, some staggered. All were coming closer. He swallowed hard. We're running straight into hell. Margot zipped the duffel. Hell's already here. They slipped out the rear door into a narrow alley behind the pharmacy. Smoke rolled overhead. Buildings burned on both sides. Windows blown out. Streets littered with bodies and overturned cars. The city of Blackwood was collapsing. Ava pointed up the road. There, that building looks intact. It was a 3-story office block. Windows still unbroken, doors closed. A miracle among ruins. Daniel nodded. They sprinted. Halfway across the street, a pack of infected rounded the corner, 6 of them, dragging their limbs, jaws clicking like cicadas. Daniel grabbed Ava's hand. Run! They bolted toward the office building. Margot firing single shots to slow the pack. One infected toppling. Another crawled despite missing his lower half. The office door was locked. Daniel slammed his shoulder against it. It barely budged. Oh, come on. Ava screamed, they're coming. Daniel stepped back, swung the bat like a batter facing the pitch of his life. Fresh. Glass shattered. Daniel picked away shards and climbed through the window, helping the others inside. They were in. The infected slammed against the glass outside, but couldn't get through yet. Margot panted. Upstairs moved. They ran for the stairways, fists, walls, and shattered windows, hammered the front entry behind them. The city would not give them a moment to breathe. Chapter 12. Someone was on the On the second floor, Daniel froze. A warm light glowed beneath the closed office door. Voices whispered inside. Not infected. Human. Daniel signaled for silence. They crept to the door. Margot raised her rifle. Ava gripped her knife so tight her hand shook. Daniel slowly pushed the door open. Inside were 5 survivors, 2 men and 3 women. Other than surgeons. Exhausted and broken, armed with chairs, hammers, and anything that could be swung. One man jumped up. Back off, who are you? Daniel lifted his hands, alive like people. Everyone hesitated. No one fired, no one attacked. The tension slipped, just enough that it could be resumed. A woman with cropped hair stepped forward. I'm Helen. You barricaded this place an hour after the silence. How did you survive? Daniel didn't know where to begin. The world ended in a night. We were just lucky. Helena nodded grimly. Luck always left. Margot stepped forward, counting big. Helena shook her head. None. We check each other every hour. A man in front of us, not like a mattress. They're mutating, changing faster every hour. But Daniel stiffened. Mutating how? Helena pointed toward the shadowed window downstairs. They're getting smarter. Chapter 13. As the audience as in the wall. Daniel and the others held the lower floors. Desks jammed into stairwells. Violent cabinets pushed against doors. Fire extinguishers ready as weapons. For the moment, they had a perfect position. But Daniel couldn't relax. Something felt wrong. A scraping noise echoed in the ventilation shaft overhead, like nails dragging through metal. Everyone froze. Ava pointed. Is that inside? The sound stopped. Silence. Then, thud, thud, thud. Helena swore. They're testing the walls. Daniel blinked. Testing. She nodded. Earlier they smashed through the bank's brick wall. Not the door, the wall. They learned where it was weakest. Daniel felt the world tilt slightly. Zombies weren't supposed to learn, weren't supposed to adapt. But these weren't classic zombies. No shambling cliches. These things were evolving. A scream was heard below. Daniel grabbed his back. Helena grabbed his arm. listen. Another scream, a wet tearing sound, then silence. Daniel's voice was low. "You need to leave this city." Helena shook her head. The roads are blocked. The military shut down the bridges. It was only one way out. Daniel swallowed. "How?" Helena looked at him long. "You have to go down around." Chapter 14. Helena led them to the basement, past rows of climbing cabinets, into a maintenance tunnel built before the office depot existed. It connected to the old city sewer system. The stink hit instantly, dampness, rot, foul air that clung to the road. But it wasn't empty. The walls held scratches, claw marks gouged in the tunnel. Dried blood smeared the floor. Someone had died here many summers. Ava shivered. "Are we sure this is better than the streets?" Margot checked her rifle. "No, but we're out of time." They crept deeper into the tunnels. Pipes clanged overhead. Water dripped. Rats fled from the survivors. Footsteps that Helena whispered. "The military was moving survivors through the sewer system before things got bad. There's an evacuation point near the eastern water plant." Daniel's eyes widened. Evacuation, people got out. Helena hesitated. Some did, not many. Daniel stayed. A chance was better than nothing. A sudden splash entered the dark. Daniel froze. Something else was down here. Walking slowly, dragging something heavy. Margot whispered. "Lights off, quiet." They crouched behind the rusted pipes, breath held. Footsteps felt closer. Then, a figure shambled into the room. At first Daniel thought it was a normal infected, but then the light caught the features. Its skull bulged grotesquely, like something had grown inside and was pressing outward. Its mouth split open wider than any human jaw could. Dark tendrils pulsed beneath its skin. A new strand. A smarter one. Helena mouthed the word. "Run." Chapter 15. The thing that followed. They bolted through the tunnel, splashing through ankle-deep water. The mutated infected shrieked and sprinted after them, faster than anything dead should move. Daniel risked a glance back. It was game. "Left," Helena shouted, pointing at a ladder leading up to a rusted service platform. Daniel shoved Ava in first, climbing behind her. Margot got on third. Helena was last. The creature leaped, slamming into the ladder and shaking it violently. Helena lost her grip, nearly falling. Daniel grabbed her wrist. "I got you." The monster clawed upward, jaws snapping inches from Helena's feet. Margot fired 3 rounds into its skull. The creature's head jerked, black fluid spraying, but it didn't stop. It kept climbing. Daniel screamed, straining to hold Helena as the creature pulled itself closer. "Shoot again." Margot fired until the gun clicked empty. Helena swung her leg and kicked the ladder loose. The bolt snapped. The metal frame tore free and collapsed onto the creature below. The monster and ladder crashed into the sewage water. Daniel pulled Helena up. They slammed the hatch shut and dropped to the concrete platform, gasping for breath. Ava looked at all of them, eyes wide with terror. "So that's what comes next." Helena nodded. "We're running out of time, and they're still changing." Daniel looked through the filthy tunnel ahead. The evacuation station was still miles away. And behind them, echoing through the pipes and vents, the creature was getting up again. Chapter 16. The Greenhouse. The survivors followed the old dirt path deeper into the abandoned botanical research center. The air smelled of rotting soil and mildew, but also something else, something bitter and chemical. The greenhouse domes towered ahead, glass panes cracked and fogged over with condensation. Inside, rows of plants wilted in their containers. Some vines pulsed, twitching as if responding to the movement of intruders. Marcus approached a large tank labeled serum enhancement drive. Inside floated a massive plant roots entwined around something fleshy. He stepped closer. The roots shifted. A decayed human face pressed against the glass, eyes cloudy but alive. Marcus stumbled back. It's growing with them," he whispered. A sudden screech echoed from the greenhouse. Michelle turned to see one of the rooted corpses tearing itself free, snapping glass with its mutated limbs. Its veins glowed green, chlorophyll pumping where blood once ran. They fled through the aisles as more plant-fused zombies uprooted themselves, dirt falling from their bodies. One of them leaped onto the catwalk. Marcus fired, but the creature barely slowed. Only one door ahead remained, marked biohazard lockdown. They didn't think, they ran. Chapter 17, The Locked Laboratory. The door slammed behind them and sealed automatically. Emergency, red lights flashed along the walls, bathing everything in a sick glow. Michelle bent forward, breathing hard. That wasn't normal infection. That was something else. On the tables, glass slides displayed microscopic images of fungal spores merging with human cells. A digital tablet still hung. Marcus tapped the screen. Project Verdance. Objective: accelerate universal pandemic immune response through genetic hybridization. Michelle read aloud, stunned. They were trying to merge plants with humans, to make people immune. The final entry chilled them. Test outcome: uncontrolled mutation. Subjects exhibit aggressive photosynthetic parasitism. Infection spreads via spores and bodily fluids. No cure. Containment impossible. Evacuate. At the bottom, smeared in dried blood. You made the planet its own rebirth. A sudden clang hit the door behind them, then another. The plant-infected creatures were trying to break through. Marcus scanned the room for weapons. There has to be another way out. Michelle found a maintenance grate in the wall. Here, they ripped it open and crawled inside as the door hinges began to bend from the pounding outside. Chapter 18, The Vent Shaft. The air in the shaft was humid and smelled of mold. Below, they could hear the screeching of the infected swarming into the laboratory. Michelle whispered as they crawled. How far do we even have to go to find others? Real survivors, not just temporary shelters. Marcus sighed. I don't know, but we'll keep moving until something gives. Suddenly, the vent shook violently. Hands no, roots burst through the metal. One of the plants infected had climbed after them. Marcus kicked, denting the metal, but more hands tore through. Michelle pulled a wrench from her belt and slammed it down, crushing fingers, but they just kept coming. Ahead was a grill leading into the underground storage room. Marcus braced himself and kicked hard. The panel popped open and he fell through, landing on stacked crates. The vent above bent inward, then sealed with vines, as if the creatures themselves were growing into the ducts. Michelle stared. They're not just alive, they're spreading through the building. Marcus grabbed her hand. Then we moved before this whole place becomes a forest. Chapter 19, The Underground Storage Room. The room was vast and dim, lit only by flickering emergency lights. Dust-covered containers filled the space, their labels faded from age. Z-compost soil additive, accelerated spore enhancers, human trial nutrient gel. Michelle whispered, this entire place was meant to turn humans into crops. Marcus pried open a crate. Inside were hazmat suits with oxygen masks. He grinned grimly. Looks like the scientists planned for a worst-case scenario. They suited up just as they heard a rumbling overload. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Then, with a deafening crash, plant-infested creatures dropped into the ventilation systems above. Their limbs twisted into thorn-covered branches, their mouths dripping sap like venom. Marcus fired, bullets sparking off tough dark skin. Michelle grabbed a fiery extinguisher and sprayed, causing the creatures to recoil from the cold. They sprinted toward a freight elevator at the far end. Michelle slammed the button until the door slid open. Two dove inside and hammered the emergency closed. One vine lashed into the elevator as the door shut, but Marcus sliced it off with a hammer cover. The elevator groaned downward. Michelle sank against the wall. Where are we even going? Marcus stared at the ascending floor counter. Bottom left, this place is this one's really big. Chapter 20, The Labyrinth Below. The elevator doors open to darkness. Not unpowered darkness, but intentional darkness. Only red safety cars a sign above the red. Restricted zone, absolute clearance. They followed the lights, passing windows that showed chamber after chamber full of mutated bodies suspended between pillars. Some twitched, some stared with blinking eyes. Some had grown full foliage from their skulls and ribs like macabre barges. Michelle's stomach tightened. This wasn't an accident. They kept going even when it failed. They found a security terminal still running on the backup power. Marcus tapped through the walls until the final emergency broadcast played. Verdance was memorable. It was a test to see if humanity could serve as coastal soil. The experiment proved successful. The outbreak was irreversible. Michelle backed away slowly. They didn't lose control. They released it. Before they could process it further, alarms suddenly blared. A mechanical hiss filled the hallway. Marcus whipped around. What now? Then they saw it. Vents along the walls opened. But no birds crawled out this time. Just green mist. A sterilization deck. Michelle grabbed Marcus's hand. Run! They bolted down the hall as followed, swallowing the corridor behind them. But ahead there was something new. An armored glass door named Hatcher. Marcus slammed his palm on the control. The door began to grind open. And what waited beyond would change everything. Chapter 21, The Hidden Hatch. The armored door slid open to the depth of the grind, revealing a stairwell descending towards the earth. The air was cold and damp and metallic, carrying a faint hum that vibrated through the bones. Michelle shivered. Why would they bury something this deep? Marcus didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the flickering lights below. The stairwell was littered with debris, broken crates, shattered lab equipment, pools of dark liquid. Something moved in the shadows. From below came a low growl echoing off the curved walls. The creatures had followed them this far, but the sounds were different, deeper, more guttural. Something had changed. Whatever's down here, it's waiting, Marcus muttered. Michelle gripped his arm. You don't have a choice. Go down. Chapter 22, The Breeding Chamber. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a massive circular chamber. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping green fluid. Glass tanks lined the walls, each holding partially grown human bodies. Some had melted limbs. Some had bark-like skin sprouting from their torsos. Michelle gasped. This is their nursery. From the far side of the chamber, a monstrous shadow moved. Hundreds of centipedes, half human, half plant, crawled along the floor, dragging their malformed limbs. Their eyes glowed faintly. One of the creatures lunged, faster than any zombie they had seen. Marcus swung the wrench, smashing its head against the concrete. It didn't stop moving. Michelle grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed, sending the creature backward. Smoke and mist combined with the report. They needed to get across the chamber to the far door. Every second counted. Chapter 23, The Poison Hall. Beyond the nursery was a hallway full greenish heat made it look like liquid humming air. Michelle coughed, feeling her throat burn. Marcus held his shirt in his mouth. "This is some kind of spore gas," Michelle whispered. "If we breathe it too long, we die." They pressed forward, carefully stepping over half the big body. Something moved in the fog, shapes that appeared human until they lunged. The gas seemed to make them stronger faster. Marcus swung hard, smashing another creature's skull. Michelle sprayed fire suppressant over the cluster of limbs, stalling them temporarily. A soft buzzing began in the sea. Thousands of tiny spores felt like snow, coating their skin. Michelle gagged, realizing some had gotten her eyes. They pushed forward blindly, every breath at risk. At last, a ladder leading upward came into view, a potential escape, but from behind. The nursery doors burst open. The seedlings were multiplying faster than ever. Chapter 24, The Escape Ladder. They climbed the ladder two at a time. Michelle's arms burned from the strain. Marcus kicked back at the creatures trying to climb after them. Above, a hatch opened onto a concrete corridor. They emerged, gasping for fresh air. But the corridor was no safer. Red emergency lights flickered. The floor vibrated with movement below. Somewhere, something enormous was breaking through the lower floors. Marcus whispered, "The main lab is collapsing. We need to keep moving." They ran down the corridor, opening doors along the way. Each room contained horrors, experimental corpses frozen in glass, some twitching, some already moving again. Michelle found a set of old military uniforms in a locker. They quickly donned them, hopping to help them blend in if they encountered soldiers, or worse. Ahead, the corridor turned sharply and opened onto a massive ventilation shaft leading outside. It smelled of fresh air and death. Chapter 25, Into the Night. The shaft led to the roof of an abandoned factory. Smoke rose in the distance, fire illuminated the human skyline. The city of Blackwood was unrecognizable, burning, screaming, crawling with mutated horrors. Marcus scanned the streets. "We need to reach the highway. That's the only way out." Michelle nodded, gripping her wrench. Ava stayed close, holding her knife tight. Suddenly, the sound of screeching metal filled the night. From the ruins below, several enormous mutants emerged. Their limbs were twisted, bark-like armor covering most of their bodies. They weren't just infected, they were evolving into something far worse. Marcus raised his rifle. "Keep moving, don't stop." They sprinted across the rooftop, leaping over gaps and debris. One creature lunged for Michelle. She swung her wrench with every ounce of strength. The mutant reeled back but didn't die. Ava yelled, "We can't fight them all." Marcus pointed to a distant bridge. "Then we run, we survive. That's all we can do." As they descended into the shadows of the ruined streets, the city roared behind them. Fire, screams, and the relentless march of the mutated undead. The apocalypse had only just begun. Chapter 26, The Highway of the Dead. The survivors reached the ruined highway. Twisted cars blocked lanes. Fires burned along the shore. Shadows moved between wrecks. The infected were everywhere. Some were crawling over vehicles, others dragging bodies to feed the evolving monstrosities below. Marcus spotted an abandoned SUV. Its doors were jammed, but the engine was intact. "We can use this," he said. "Get in fast." They shoved the doors open, sliding inside just as a horde turned toward the noise. Michelle grabbed the wheel. "Go!" The SUV roared to life. The tires burned rubber against cracked asphalt. Behind them, the horde surged, claws scraping metal and asphalt. Ava screamed as one huge mutant leapt onto the hood. Marcus smashed it with the butt of his rifle, but its bark-like armor barely cracked. The creature fell off the side, right, before it pulled itself back up and continued the chase. The highway stretched for miles, lined with fire and smoke. the screams of the dying echoing into the night. "This isn't a road anymore," Michelle said grimly. "It's a gauntlet." Chapter 27, The Bridge Collapsed. Up ahead, a partially destroyed bridge leaned over a flooded river. Sections were missing, the steel beams twisted like bones. "Speed up," Marcus yelled. Michelle floored the gas. The SUV bounced over cracked asphalt, tires skidding dangerously. Behind them, the horde was closing. They had learned to jump, to run in coordination. Even the mutated ones were smarter now, cutting off the survivors' paths. They reached the broken section. Marcus looked down at the swirl of water. "Don't stop, we can make it." The SUV left the gap, tires skimming broken metal and concrete. They landed on the other side with a jolt. But one massive creature clung to the rear, howling. It tore off part of the bumper before Margot grabbed a flare gun and shot it square in the face. The creature shrieked, then fell into the river below. No time to breathe. The highway ended in a forest, only darkness ahead. Chapter 28, The Forest of Shadows. The SUV crashed through overgrown trees, branches scraping windows. Mutated vines twisted along the ground, attacking tires and clawing at doors. Michelle swerved to avoid a fallen tree. Marcus swung his rifle at another spore-infected creature that tried to latch onto the hood. Ava ducked to avoid snapping limbs. They could hear the forest itself moving, branches creaking, leaves rustling like something alive was stalking them. The spores had spread here too, mutating even the plant life. "They're turning the whole world into this," Michelle whispered, her voice shaking. "Not just the cities, everything." Ahead, the trees thinned. A faint glow appeared, the first sign of human civilization, or what was left of it. Chapter 29, The Safe Zone. The glow was from a fortified compound, metal barricades, guard towers, and flickering searchlights. Soldiers patrolled the perimeter. Michelle waved frantically. "We're alive, let us in." A guard shouted from above, "Hold your position. Are you infected?" Daniel lifted his arms. "No, clean." A siren blew. The gate opened just enough. They drove the SUV through, skidding onto gravel. Behind them, the forest seemed to roar with frustration as the mutated creatures reached the barriers but could not enter. The survivors finally stopped, gasping and shaking. Ava looked back, still trembling. Did we make it, or just delay? Marcus scanned the perimeter. For now, we're safe, but the world out there is gone. Chapter 30, A New Beginning. Inside the compound, they were checked for infection. Soldiers and medics examined them, isolated them briefly, then allowed them to rest. Michelle looked out across the walls of the distant city, smoke rising, shadows moving. The world had changed forever. Marcus joined her. "We survived, but the fight isn't over. We'll have to rebuild or die trying." Ava whispered behind them, "They'll come back, all of them." Helena nodded grimly. Yes, the spores, the mutations, were still out there. Smarter, faster, waiting. Daniel, exhausted, sank against the wall. "Then we learn, we adapt, we fight. That's all we can do." Outside, the wind carried distant shrieks. Fires flickered along the horizon. Somewhere in the ruins, the mutated undead were evolving. Inside the safe zone, for the first time in days, the survivors closed their eyes, but none of them slept completely. Because they all knew the apocalypse wasn't over. It had just begun. The end